Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our final episode here at the DisruptED Summit in Phoenix, Arizona, hosted by ASU and put on by Collegius Education. Been a great full day of conversations, just to place it in time and space. This is our final interview. So, we're reflecting on the day and full day of great sessions and stuff. Talked to a lot of folks here for the podcast episodes, but we're wrapping up with Dan White from New Jersey Institute of Technology, talking about sort of just online education and sort of the, just challenges, successes, and, just his perspective and experience with that, which is always a delight for me. Always love talking about that stuff. But we'll start as we always do, Dan, if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and your role at NJIT.
Great. Well, I'm very happy to be here and to share. And thanks for the opportunity. I've been at NJIT for about 4 years now. Prior to that, I was at Temple and then Southern New Hampshire University before that as well. So I've been in the online space since 2006. It allowed me to really fulfill kind of like a personal mission about providing access, no matter where I was, either K through 12 or higher ed. It's always been important to me to provide, pathways of opportunity to people to be their best, and for the last 20 years or so, that's been the online space. At NJIT, I'm the Associate Provost of Online Learning. We have a cross-functioning team of marketers, instructional designers, enrollment service managers, and all these individuals have been pulled together very intentionally to offer a really good student experience, to liaise with faculty and program chairs to figure out how we can highly integrate everything from when a student first inquires about our program to walking across the stage. And we just want to make sure that everything that we do from a marketing standpoint, a recruiting standpoint, a teaching and learning standpoint, it's all integrated and integral and truthful, and there's a seamlessness there. We're always aspiring to be seamless in that endeavor.
Yeah, I know that's a big kind of vibe and nature of the conversations and sessions happening here at DisruptED. But I'm curious if you can kind of chart a little bit of the path of like the story so far that brought you to this moment of the online programs at NJIT. Because I think it is an idea of like, it is this whole new kind of avenue for institutions that does kind of introduce an opportunity to rethink how you're sort of leveraging your tech stack and those sort of things, and how you think about, support, student support, and those sort of things, and how that's accessed by students. But just any context you can give on the past, the story so far that led to this current moment.
Sure. On the personal level, I was at Southern New Hampshire University for a couple of years, very much a corporate centralized model. We were required to go ahead and partner with on-campus colleges and units to bring out the very best and re-represent their curriculum and bring it to a globally distributed student audience and body. From that, I said, okay, well, there's going to be a point where traditional higher ed is going to want that as well. So from a personal journey standpoint, I tried to be a sponge, learn as much as possible, and then venture out. The stop at Temple, I was allowed to go ahead and leverage some of those learnings. And then after a while, I decided I wanted to change. I want to have a change in a place where the enrollment and the curriculum were on an upswing, and the profile was on an upswing. Not to say Temple is not a great place; it's a fantastic place. But NJIT itself is a place with their STEM-based programming, with their rising profile. They did already have a toe in the online space. I think I could go there and kind of begin to put it on a different level per se. When I arrived at NJIT, they were involved in a declining revenue share based relationship with a different sizable vendor. There was a lot of a dystrophy, if you would. There was definitely a need for some level of integration, some level of these offices talking to one another a little bit more. So part of that journey was actually me proposing that we bring in somebody to really just do marketing, recruiting, and student retention success, because what they had developed over time is a very sound instructional design unit, and we didn't need any help with that. this was all kind of framed within a conversation around organizational learning. It took a long-term approach. It just wasn't about short-term gains, but what can we do to bring in a vendor like Collegius to offer all kinds of support that would then allow us to actually, should someday, if we decide to have this or sunset the fee-for-service-based relationship, we'd be able to actually go ahead and have built up our capacity. And that's kind of what made the difference because, when we did speak to groups like Collegius, actually when we spoke to Collegius, they were more about having us learn and become more efficient and better, knowing that someday that possibility would happen. So it's kind of like their level of servicing, their level of teaching us, their level of making us better, is going to be part of their own demise when someday we decide to cut the cord, but then they should feel proud around being able to help us, figure things out on our own and be a little more independent in the space, but I foresee a long relationship with that.
Yeah. And I think it is that idea of that is a paradigm shift, certainly in sort of the OPM space. And I think they're kind of in a little bit of identity crisis because it was sort of like a lot of growth or, emphasis or kind of uplifting of the models of like rev share and everything and these like long-term contracts. But like, that is not what is needed in this moment. You need Definitely more not. Sort of like flexibility and flexibility or kind of adaptability, and all those sort of like action words for like the partnerships of an institution with various vendors and maybe ones that specialize in one thing or another, and even that idea of kind of building the internal capacity because it's like that idea of like treating the symptoms versus like just giving the cure kind of thing where it's like, I could get you hooked on this, like, prescription drug forever instead of just like, oh, can we just like, cure this the core thing. But, I think, that is just a great example of a story that kind of is emblematic of kind of the shifting of, certainly OPMs in this space, but, that idea of like you worked kind of across all these different institutions and kind of the maturation and expansion of digital education and a bunch of different types of institutions, different shapes and even different kind of emphasis, programs and stuff. But we'll break down a couple of those components that you mentioned, the kind of recruitment side, retention side, and stuff like that. So starting with the beginning, the recruitment strategy, what were changes there that you felt like were really making a positive impact as you were kind of like, blossoming these online programs?
Sure. It was interesting because when people start, when the board of trustees say, a lot of them came from NJIT, and a lot very proud. They should be proud. They thought, okay, well, if we get the price point right, we have the right programs, they've already been online a little bit, let's just kind of go for it. Well, there wasn't any real targeted approach, and we had done, before engaging a relationship with Collegius, we had done our own homework to feel like, okay, well, where are our students coming from? It's a very basic question, and 86% of our students were coming within a 140-mile radius. And then the research, and that just kind of maps onto the COLIA report, the Quality Matters report around where your students come from. So as opposed to saying we're national and global, well, no, we're more regional, but we also have a lot of different adult learners popping up in 10 municipal areas in the mid-Atlantic, also on the West Coast as well. As NJIT began to send people, the diaspora of people across the nation and the world, we begin to see different kinds of hotspots of where we can actually market, where people are inquiring from. So on the recruiting side, we'll say on the marketing and the recruiting side, we began to really focus on, where the fish were, our alumni, the inquiries, what have you. And we began to realize it was definitely, the New York City, New Jersey area, the tri-state area, Philadelphia, DC. And with that, we just began to say, okay, let's focus it there. And if let's also use different kinds of peer institution comparisons of people who are, not the Georgia Techs, which are, 2,000 miles away, a different kind of model altogether. But let's look at Northeastern and Drexel and Temple, and Stevens Institute that allow us to really figure out, okay, like who's really kind of speaking to the same people in our own backyard. As we became more focused in that area, and we decided to do like, Penn Station takeovers or MLS Red Bull Stadium takeovers, we began to see the needles, the needle kind of move a little bit. So it really was focusing on where we knew the fish were. And no one really took that time out. The previous rev share model group, they took a buckshot approach to it, and it just and that just kind of we'll take them from anywhere. Well, NJIT being a regional powerhouse STEM institution, it's very much, if you think about it, STEM, very focused, quantitative set of students. New Jersey, it's New Jersey Institute of Technology. It doesn't roll off the tongue. At the same time, it's very regionally based. It's a powerhouse. It's a STEM flagship of the New Jersey system. So we just felt the need to go ahead and leverage those kinds of messages that were kind of our real, a grounding of who we were, as we began to kind of become more aggressive in that space.
Yeah, I think that is just a great kind of anecdote, because I think it is that idea of like, there is a place, certainly, if you were like, you know what, we're going to go try to plant a flag out in California. It's like, but that is a completely different sort of endeavor of like, we have to introduce ourselves to begin with, you know? So the idea of like that playbook that you would use that has been effective in your region is going to be completely different than, you know, and again, it's like, there is a place for that. Certain institutions do choose to go that route. But I think even with like, I would imagine, I guess, is like a super quick follow-up, like the time horizon on doing what you did is far shorter than having to like spend a lot of time doing this brand awareness. And then after that, doing all this stuff to like, you know, make a compelling case for like other, you know, competitors in a completely new region. So like, I guess that was probably part of it too, is that you do just need to be, you know, trying to find that right balance of like making decisions and investments that are going to have a return, you know, in a reasonable amount of time when, you know, maybe a board or whoever else is, you know, approving a investment or pivot in strategy or something. So
and it was important for us to actually, in the name of integrity, really figure out like who we were, you know, and with that, it's something about the geographical location, you know, it being a gritty Newark, New Jersey, STEM based, you know, NJIT makes we're not an applied vocational university. We're, you know, an R1 institution, you know, that has a very powerful computer science and engineering school. And the ability to actually provide access to these, you know, we'll say life-changing degrees. I mean, literally, if you go ahead and get a graduate degree in either of those, you know, large disciplinary areas, you know, it is life-changing, you know, and our ability to actually think about how we can attract those individuals who might be, you know, the first master's holders, you know, adult learners, you know, trying to be upwardly mobile, you know, in their community. You know, we really felt like we should double down on that, because it truly was who we are, even at the undergraduate level.
Yeah. And even I think it's the idea of like telling that story in that region, like it would resonate in a different way than if you were doing it. And again, there's a place for it. It can work, but like it's going to be, I guess on one hand harder, but like, you know, you tell the story of NJIT in the region of where people are aware of it. They might be like, oh yeah, you know, my cousin went there. What, like there's just a different way that I think it takes hold or resonates or just sort of like, you know, clicks for people, because it is just, you know, I think, you know, to some level kind of emblematic even of the region of just sort of the nature of like what people do with those degrees in that area, or, you know, that like I've grown up in the Mid-Atlantic my whole life and kind of that area and everything. And it is just like, it's a vibe, you know, like these sort of like salty, you know, East Coast cities and whatever. Like, I don't know. It's something to me. It's just that idea of like, you know, have a very clear target of what you're doing and what you're expecting from it. Cause it's like just the idea of like doing a brand awareness campaign in a completely different region or whatever. It's just like, you got to level set the expectations with that, because it is just gonna be like, oh, we got a bunch of traffic on our website, whatever. It's like, that's great. That's what you can expect from that. Like, it's just a bunch of people like looking at you. But moving on from that, I think the other side of the coin is certainly, you know, you do all that, you have success with it, you get students in, you got to retain them and give them a good experience and, you know, keep them persisting. What worked on the retention side to kind of sustain the growth and kind of increased attention in your online program?
Sure. With respect to retention rates, you know, grad R1 institutions like ours, you know, seemingly, you know, fall to spring, spring to fall, basically that end was around 70 to 75%, you know, and for the continuing students, you know, specifically, you know, we actually did not have a lot of great graduate level advising, you know, within the graduate space. We'll say nationally, it was very traditional in that it was basically faculty based, or centralized but somewhat removed, or centralized and overtaxed or overstretched because they're trying to handle all the population. So what has happened in the last 18 months specifically is that, you know, we have integrated retention and student success coaching structures that basically, you know, allow our students who are going through, we'll say, the Canvas LMS to basically have, you know, their performance tracked, not just by their faculty members, but from actually, you know, the student success coaches. And when a flag goes up, you know, and it might be time for a phone call. When somebody does great, you know, it might be time for a phone call. And these voice-to-voice connections, you know, if we deputize as student success coaches at Collegius to go ahead and be good stewards of the university, they've been fantastic stewards, you know, and we've received feedback in the early going from students to say, where has this been? I really appreciate this layer of support. My professor is great, but it's nice to have somebody else there who's not my professor. So there's a touch of humanity. There's a touch of empathy. There's a touch of pristine timing. There's multiple touch points. There's no incursions. There's no academic swim lanes where people are overhelping. Like we make sure that all the deans and the associates deans understood that the retention program we put into place with Collegius is about specific types of nudges that does not overstep. And it's worked like a charm. The early returns right now, those 72 to 75% return rates, we're still reconciling the numbers to make sure we got them right. But I'm going to go public right now for the first time. They've gone from 72% with an asterisk next to them up to like 88%, and whereas the demographic cliff hasn't happened yet at the grad online level just yet, our ability to serve students who are with us already, they've already chosen us. That we want to maintain that sense of connection with them so they stay with us, so they persist, so they succeed, so they re-register, incomplete, and then come on back for different things as well.
Right. And then just like good word of mouth, those sort of,
the whole thing, but it's been very intentionally built, with good LMS integration, a good communication plan in place, not overdoing it, and being able to go ahead on a monthly basis, circle back to the dean's team to say, this is what we're hearing. The value added for some of this, besides just those numbers, are that we're getting qualitative feedback that the deans love to hear. We sometimes kind of bust the chops of our advisors and our faculty members for not being great at admit to registration advisors, or being able, like going from the fall to the spring where that registration window is kind of tight, to get the students what they need. Well, we've come to learn with the continuing students speaking to the retention specialists or the student success coaches that the professors have been great. They've been accessible. They've been replying to emails. They've been engaged on discussion boards. They give feedback. Some of this stuff you only get if you're reading teaching, like every teaching evaluation. Mm-hmm. Now we get them on a weekly basis, and the deans love to hear this. So it seems like we're really trying to create this ecosystem of support, which right now the numbers are panning out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's great to hear. And as a just kind of testament to what you're doing, or kind of to reinforce it. I mean, years ago, I was doing similar work as a coach, and just like the value of it on just kind of that, personal human level, whatever. I think, people appreciated having kind of someone in their corner that, they could even just, vent about their, they're doing a group project with their classmates. They could complain about that, or just like legitimate stuff of like, I've been trying to reach out to my professor. They're just not getting back to me. It's like, hey, all right, I'll, try to escalate or nudge or whatever else. But, I think it is a valuable investment. I mean, that sort of return of getting that kind of level of gains, on retention, like, I think, it kind of pays for itself to be investing, into getting coaches and all that. And I appreciate you giving us the scoop and the breaking news of your, that's
really literally hot off the press,
right,
and we hope those numbers pan out. I was speaking to my director today. We came out of a meeting, and it turns out that the success coaching team was talking to our College of Engineering dean about the early qualitative returns. And it turns out in that conversation, there were a couple of students who did make it explicit that they had went to NJIT, had come on back. And then with that, they've been able to go ahead and do an internship somewhere along the way, and decided to parlay that into master's credits. And it was interesting. But it seems like there's fresh narratives that we can use now on web pages or on blurbs or stories. And our marketing director is a storyteller, like many marketing directors are. He's like trying to find a way to parlay all of that good information in ways that we can just continue to an unexpected value added are these stories.
Yeah. That's a good call out. Yeah. I mean, we just connect the 2 points that we kind of hit on here of like the recruitment strategies with the retention stuff, like having those coaches and those frequent touch points, like they can, leverage those relationships. They probably would know, like, oh, this person, like, super easy to get a hold of. They're great to talk to. They get a great perspective on things. Like, they'd be perfect for a soundbite, or even just, like synthesizing, like, I'm talking to like dozens of students every week. I could tell you kind of anecdotally the things that like, they like about the program, or that they struggle with, that maybe we can make adjustments on and make it, better, or any of those sort of things. But I think, it's a very virtuous cycle of, if you have that kind of culture, that ecosystem for your online programs of, a lot of just consistent touch points and a very supportive environment, and, messaging that is like kind of compelling or clear, relevant, versus it being something that feels kind of stock or kind of, too kind of vanilla. But, those are great call outs there. And, for the sake of time, we'll have to start to wrap up here with our final question we're asking everybody. What bit of advice that you would like to give to other higher ed leaders that are navigating this moment?
Well, I'd say that it's important to make sure, especially if you're in a decentralized setting, we are just actually at the beginning of our decentralized journey, and understand that all the different disparate units, are under some level of stress to be accountable and innovative at the same time, and I would say that as early as possible, if there's some kind of galvanizing call where some tangible action can grow out of it. And there could be some kind of synthesizing moment where, as Dan had done during his drawing campaign, or I did Dan Atkinson from Collegius, the ability to actually have these conversations, really better understand what each group does. To go ahead and reduce silos, speak about what exactly people's charges are. As you become more decentralized. It's really important to have, I think, job specificity be very clearly defined. So you're no longer stepping on toes. You're not re-erecting any kind of territories. And to really clearly define, given the online space, exactly which one of these groups is going to help you in certain kinds of ways. Clearly define that and really stay within that framework. It allows people to actually have their expectations raised, understand when they're going to be in touch with you, what they're going to need with you. So I think it also just helps you be more planful. It helps you, and I think if you're being planful in advance, be able to make certain kind of requests that are going to be granted in advance, and then the ability to actually think about those process-based steps. We did this first, and now we're here. It allows you to kind of look back, and see, okay, well, how did we get here, and apply that model elsewhere. As we bring in new players to the university, like we bring in advising or we bring in kind of specialized marketing, it allows us to say this model has worked elsewhere, right? So there's something about that notion of, early engagement, being able to look at what the goal is collectively, in a way where people aren't being defensive. It's kind of a really global way of thinking. It's kind of vanilla, but I just know that for us, we continue to turn to those models, as being the way forward.
No, yeah. I mean, I totally get it because I think, it always comes up in these conversations and it's always important to give kind of honorable mention to it of like kind of the change management piece of all of this. And I think the idea of like, that's kind of what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that idea of like, okay, I'm listening to this episode. I think we do need to really make a really earnest kind of committed effort to building out our digital education portfolio and the whole kind of digital student experience. The idea of like getting leadership on board with that, setting like a clear goal of like, all right, we're aiming to do this by this point, and here's how we're kind of allocating responsibilities and everything. And because I do think it's like, I've had conversations or like, listen to other podcasts where like, in higher ed nowadays, you'll hear people just kind of make these proclamations of like internships for all or mentors for all. And like, it's kind of like an unfunded mandate. Sure. And it sort of just falls in someone's lap, and they have to kind of figure it out. I think it's that idea of like charting a course, knowing that it's, we're going to do this right. It's going to take some time, but also, being considerate of like, okay, we're moving this person into this strategic position to do these things. We're kind of advertising that, internally to our organization and all that. Like, I think that is just, like a very smart move because I think it is the idea of like the wind is blowing, continuing to see, tailwinds in the direction of like digital education. It's very much, in demand for students in whatever kind of form and shape they take it. But it still requires, I think, just like a concerted kind of coalition at an institution to get there, do it right, have a supportive environment for those students, and I don't know, just be intentional, be thoughtful, those kind of action words there. But I think that is great advice, I think, to kind of like ground kind of this conversation and, kind of just the reflections and things that you've shared from your journey there at NJIT to kind of expand the online programs. But just thank you so much for hanging out, sharing all that you did. Thank you to Collegius and ASU for hosting us here. Just thanks so much for your time.
Great. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it. And we hope that everyone just has good health 2026.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.